please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frayne. I'm the host, and today I have a really exciting guest to join me. First of all, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the podcast. As usual, we have a lot of great guests coming on, and today I have former MP Mike Morrice from the Federal Green Party and from Kitchener Centre, Ontario. Hello, Mike. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you again, Brent. Yeah, thanks for having me.
We wish we could say current MP. We wish we could say current
MP. Current MP, and also one of my previous podcasts, Mike. I made it as it was a joke after, and I was like, oh, it was one of those brainstorm fog events where I said, yeah, I have Mike Morrice joining me from the former BC Green Party. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, he did a little intro of your segment on the last podcast we did. We said we're gonna have Mike Morrice from the BC Greens on, and
I was like, oh man, you didn't say that.
but we do wish you were here with the BC Greens, actually, because that would mean that. That our BC NDP wouldn't have the one seat majority that they have right now. Oh. So, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Let's talk about what you've been up to, Mike.
Well, first, just want to say thanks for having me back again, Brent and Neil. I've really enjoyed these conversations over the years, and glad to be back with you today also.
Oh, yeah, and sorry, what I was going to say too, like we talked a bit off camera. I've been doing some what do you call it, spring cleaning of the YouTube channel, and I've been going through like old content, and I was able to count up all the times you've come on the show. And in the 3.5 years that we've done the show, this is the 12th time now. This is an even dozen times. Times you've been on the show now. So it's
awesome. Right
really
on.
Cool.
And you keep having me back.
Yeah. So it's really cool. I actually have a hard count now that I was able to go back and count them all. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's really makes my day.
Yeah.
And it's awesome having you coming back, Mike. And ensuring your strong advocacy. You're very passionate for your community and for Ontario and all across the country, from coast to coast to coast. And I really appreciate all your advocacy, all your hard work that you put in. Advocacy for anywhere from like housing to affordability. Focusing on people with disabilities from all angles, and so it's greatly appreciated. And I know it echoes throughout the disability community across Canada. People who live in legislative poverty, and having your voice being carried forward, it really makes a huge difference, and I'm greatly appreciated. And I think I'd probably speak on behalf of so many fellow disabled Canadians who just want to have their voices heard, and I think that's the voice that carries forward. I mean, I know that right now, unfortunately, you didn't get reelected as member of Parliament for the Federal Green Party, and it's unfortunate that the voters decided to have a different representative. But I guess we'll find out during the next election of what are your plans. And I mean, the other representative who replaced your riding, hopefully their voice will be carried forward. But and represent people with disabilities and other needs that are met in your community and across Canada. But I guess my question is, what are your plans, Mike? Like, where are you at these days, and like community events, and what do you see yourself going forward? Do you see yourself running again at all, or?
I like that you get right to it, Brent.
Yeah.
I guess to start, I wanted to share like, the last 11 times I was with you both. I feel like in every case, you both helped strengthen my advocacy because it meant I wasn't only hearing from folks with disabilities in my community, but through you both and online, through social media, that connection is for me just so important because I had hoped the whole way through to make sure when I was speaking, that amendment to index the disability benefit to inflation, that
Yes.
came from the community. And so I really appreciate you both for helping keep me closely connected. I didn't realize it was 11 times, but all throughout that, to me, I remember the first time it was right as we were working on that first petition. I think it was late 2021, early 2022,
Hmm.
but all the way through, both at home in my community and in spaces like this one with you both, I feel like you helped keep me connected to what you were experiencing. And I'd like to hopefully we get a chance to talk a bit today about some of what I have been hearing, and I'm sure you both might want to share about with respect to the disability benefit
Hmm.
today. But I feel like you both really helped keep me connected to the community, which, in my opinion, had me as a stronger MP when I could go to Parliament and, reiterate what I'd heard from you both and from other folks with disabilities across the country.
Hmm.
Um, to answer your question, Brent, about what comes next, I wish I had a clearer answer for you at this point. What I can commit to is that I'm going to continue to be putting my time and energy towards making the biggest difference I can in issues that matter to my community. And of course, poverty is one of those issues. Since the election, nothing has gotten any better yet for folks with disabilities living in legislated poverty in Kitchener or in other parts of the country. And so that work continues. The question for my family and I now is where could I best put my time and energy to have the greatest impact possible, to do the most good? That was my interest when I was an MP, do as much good as you can for as long as you can.
Yep.
And it remains my interest now as I sort through where I could put my energies. But what I have been doing is just staying, in solidarity with folks across our community. I'm going to continue to speak up and speak out. I have a platform
Yeah.
and I want to be using that platform. So we've been clear with local folks across Waterloo Region, and I'll be clear with you both as well, that I do want to continue to use that platform. And I am still to this day on the shadow cabinet for the Green Party of Canada, sorry. And so I remain the critic for housing and the critic for disability inclusion. And so that's another avenue to continue to use to amplify some of what I hear from you both today and from folks across my community going forward as well.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, Mike. I look back at that memory lane of when we first interacted on when I had my former Twitter space. There was a guest that came on who had actually who had recommended that I would have you on as a guest, and the name would be Hayden's mama. Hayden's mama, she had, I guess, had contacted you, and then she had mentioned for you to come on to the show. And so I want to give a huge grat out to Hayden's mama for making that happen. We've taught you a lot about how poverty impacts Canadians with disabilities across Canada, and also Hayden's mama for what she had gone through in her life. That's how we first interacted, and so thank you on that for Hayden's mama. I won't say her real name, but it's thank you and on that, Mike, for joining. Way back when, and continuing your advocacy going forward.
Well, and her courage too. You might remember, Brent, I had the chance to share Hayden's story in Parliament
Mm-hmm.
with his mom's permission, and Hayden should be with us still today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her courage in allowing for folks like myself um, to help the rest of us understand the impacts that legislated poverty has on folks. Um, when I think about what I got to do as an MP, it's both I'm proud of some of the things we got done,
Mm-hmm.
but also when I think about when you have that kind of level of privilege, whose stories are you sharing? Who are you spending your time fighting for? And it's my opinion that groups like the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers have more than enough time with MPs, and they get rewarded handsomely for it. Oil and gas companies get $18 billion in subsidies from the federal government every single year, and I think on average they meet with MPs 5 times a day, 7 days a week,
Wow.
365 days a year.
Oh, wow.
And so it was my hope as an MP to spend my time lifting up the voices of folks that aren't as often heard in Parliament, who don't have the lobbying power of some of these massive industries. And I think about Hayden's mom and her story and Hayden's story, and I'm really grateful to my community to have given me the privilege to speak on behalf of folks like her, whose story is tragic, but not unique.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to understand the impacts of the reality that every provincial and territorial program across the country for folks with disabilities is below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of how long it takes to get onto ODSP when someone turns 18, for example, and how completely inadequate it is. And there's no one better to help us understand that than folks with lived experience and the caregivers of those who have lived experience.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Exactly.
sorry, one of the reasons why we really wanted to have you on again was because I've been following you on your social media that you are on. You're not on Twitter anymore, but I do follow you on your other social media channels, and you've been posting 1 minute videos about disability advocacy still, and I thought, well, that's great, but I thought I think Mike deserves more than 1 minute. So rather than just do a 1 minute video of where you did a thank you to the community and stuff like that, I thought, well, I think Mike Morrice deserves more than a minute to just come back and update everybody on what's going on. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for that, Neil. And likewise, folks with disabilities deserve better as well. It was in the dying weeks before the last election, the closing weeks of the last parliament, that we finally got the regulations for the disability benefit to be finalized. That was one of the last campaigns and letters that I wrote to a minister, was pushing for that to be the case alongside so many others, lifting up folks with disabilities who knew that if that regulation didn't get published before the election, there wouldn't be even an inadequate disability benefit. There wouldn't be one at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, when we all made clear that the new cabinet of Mr. Carney prior to the election didn't even have a minister for disability inclusion. To me, that's kind of some of the last calls that I made in my time as an MP to reverse that decision and to return a disability inclusion minister to cabinet. And I appreciate you still following along, Neil, and I hope others are as well, because we need to make sure we're continuing to lift up the voices of folks in poverty and those who are disproportionately in poverty, like folks with disabilities. And I've said to a few people back home, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here, and I'm still just as concerned and disappointed and angry as I was before the last election. And so those are issues I'm going to continue to talk about. The new cabinet doesn't have a minister for disability inclusion,
which is crazy to me. Crazy.
It's
Graceful.
yeah, it demonstrates that that the disability community is not a priority to this government, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you both were following, but last week Elizabeth May in question period asked a question about the disability benefit.
Yeah, I caught that actually.
About, well, did you notice that so it's now under Minister of Families and Children or
And
something,
yeah,
I
families
guess.
and children and jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
well, but
very way up there. Yeah.
did you notice when the minister responded to the question, she wasn't even able to correctly name the disability benefit. She called it a credit.
I noticed
I
that.
heard that too. Yeah,
So
Yeah.
it gives you an indication of
yeah.
where this, if that level of, briefing, not that the person, she's new into the role, so, but in terms of the briefing notes in that, if that's a level where she's not even aware that it's a benefit, it's not a credit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is an indication to the disability community of how much more work needs to be done as a result of not even having a minister who is, directly accountable. So those are calls, among others, we can talk about over the course of the
Yeah.
next bit here today
I wonder if
that
that was.
we need
I
to
wonder if
continue
it
to
was
push.
$1 million question. If
Mm.
she would have got that right, like if it was a
Mm.
who wants to be a millionaire, if it was the final question, I was like, would she have got it right then?
Well, it makes it clear that the advocacy that we were doing together needs to continue, because this minister now needs to know what the benefit is, as well as what it will mean to fix it and fully fund it, because it remains locked behind the disability tax credit. It remains based on household income. We can go over the long list again of all the
Yeah.
issues with the disability benefit, but if the minister doesn't even know what it's called yet, it gives you a sense of how much work needs to be done.
Yeah, there's a huge problem when a minister doesn't even know the file properly. I'm still baffled on how the benefit became historic down to watered down, literally down to
Yeah.
it's like taking the carbon out of a pop. You got a flat pop now. I mean, from all fizzy and this is going to be great and down to nothing. Like it's just based on individual. Now it's all based on household. It was supposed to be historic, modeled after the GIS, and now it's just basically despicable.
I've long held the opinion that if Carla Qualter was still on the file, she would have got over the finish line. But partway through, you could tell the narrative change. You could tell that she was being fed other, basically somebody was telling her, like, say this now, Carla, like change your narrative. I think on the last podcast, I termed it like slow your roll, Carla. You have to slow your roll. You're doing too good of a job, Carla. Stop doing a good job now. That's kind of what I think happened. There.
Well, the benefit was too good, eh? And it was gonna help at least minimum 1.5 million originally, and then it went down to hundreds of thousands. Then it went down to tens of thousands, and I saw the narrative change, and I thought this is not good.
Separate from people, though, this was one of the themes of the last parliament, and you could even say of the last government. Time and again, there was lofty rhetoric. We're going to plant 2 billion trees.
Yeah.
Anybody counted how many trees are planted yet? We're going to cap emissions. Last election under first past the post.
Right.
Time and again, this lofty rhetoric that did a disservice not only to the folks that were directly impacted, but to, belief in elected leaders. I think it's really important to be direct and clear with folks and to follow through. And time and again, there wasn't that follow through. And it was the government, and it was often that particular prime minister who set that rhetoric. It wasn't others. They said it in their own throne speech.
Right.
They set the bar in each of those cases where they chose to set it, and had a very difficult time following through right across the board. And this was one of those examples that they chose to use those words and those metrics. And obviously, what was delivered didn't reflect anything of what was either promised or what the community was calling for.
One thing on the Canada Disability Benefit, Mike, is I still will advocate and push for it because I believe that anyone on provincial and territorial benefits and federal benefits should. I mean, they're already disabled. They're already designated as a person, legislated designated as a person as with a disability. So they should automatically get that federal benefit and like without having to jump through the DTC requirements, 16 pages of rhetoric paperwork that doctors don't even know. A lot of them don't even know how to fill it out. If they don't choose the right language in that, then people are not going to be qualified for it. And then they got to apply for the application that hasn't even come out for the Canada Disability Benefit yet.
Bingo.
He launched in July,
Yeah.
and doctors, like I have one of my neighbors who is a doctor, and he says, person is designated as a person with disabilities in their province and territory. I go, right. He goes, right. We don't have the time. We don't have the energy. Why should people who are in legislative poverty, and that's coming from a doctor, in legislative poverty, he says, having to basically fork out, hundreds of dollars to fill out all this paperwork. He says, you know how many clients I have? I go, I have no clue, sir. I have 150 patients. So imagine 150, that's a lot of hours that I got to spend filling out something that someone that may not even qualify for a federal benefit. They qualify provincially, so why don't they qualify federally? I go, bingo. Well, I said, you get it? He goes, well, the problem is the federal government does get it, though, Brent. He goes, they do get it. They're doing it deliberately as a tactic to delay. And I said, well, it puts people's lives at risk. It harms them in many ways. He goes, things have to change. Doctors of BC and across Canada, we've joined in a unison measure. He said, I don't know if you read the report. I said, I did see it floating out on social media. I goes, right. So we're telling the federal government to scrap that, to automatically qualify citizens in Canada who have disabilities that are on provincial territory benefit to get it automatically. He goes, you don't need all this red tape. I said, do you have a pair of scissors?
Well, one of the biggest voices that we're hearing now, like basically screaming voices now, is this new application process for the CDB. It's supposed to be coming, like the checks are supposed to be coming in our bank accounts on July 1st, but they haven't even rolled out the application process yet, and there's literally people, like I'm following it online, and there's literally people that are going on the Government of Canada website and hitting refresh on the refresh key on the Canada Disability page and saying, where's the link for the application process? Refresh, and it's not there yet.
Meanwhile, CRA has actually laid off hundreds of thousands. What could go wrong there?
Yeah. Well, that's the accountability that we can continue to call for. I can tell you, if I was an MP today, it's one of the things I would want to be bringing up in Parliament, and it's something that we can continue to advocate for. Is that, first of all, they need to open the applications. That was supposed to open in May, as you say, Neil. If it's going to start July 1st, I see the fine print now. They seem to have shifted to now saying it's going to start in July as opposed to July 1st.
So into July then.
Well, who knows exactly? But we're into June now, and the applications haven't even opened yet.
Oh, man.
And so another example of the pressure that needs to be applied for folks who are joining in this conversation. They could consider to reach out to the minister and to their MP and to put pressure on the federal government to open the application process for the Canada Disability Benefit, even at a meager maximum of $200. That's money that should be flowing July 1st. And we're recording this in mid-June, and those applications haven't even opened yet. I think it's important to at least mention, though, there are some resources that folks can find now. One that I've been using, I'd be curious if Neil and Brent, if there's different sites that you're sharing with folks. I've been sharing CanadaDisabilityBenefit.ca, as one resource
I know
hub.
about that one, yeah.
Yeah, so when applications open, folks can find more details there about the disability benefit application. But in the meantime, more background on the benefit is all available there as well. And to me, we need to make it easy so that when applications do open, that the disability community knows about it. Because one of the biggest issues I've had is even um, with the number of barriers that are in place
Hmm.
that will make it more and more difficult for those who are eligible to even know about it and apply and go through all the hoops. So I'm still continuing to encourage folks to apply for the DTC if they haven't already. There was money in last year's budget. Something else we can be tracking is when they allocate that money. That was meant to, my understanding was that money would go to help doctors to complete the applications for the disability tax credit.
Right.
Um, that was meant to help remove that barrier. That was announced in last year's budget.
Oh,
Over a year ago, that money was announced. It was in the order, I think, of around $250 million or so that was
Oh, wow.
in budget 2024.
oh,
That's another point of advocacy that we could be continuing to lift up is to allocate those funds to help make it easier for more folks to apply for the DTC, but of course to open the applications.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, go figure. It's like not even a month away, and they don't even have the applications out. I mean, it's just beyond bizarre. I mean, here's a little tidbit of information that I shared before with Neil on the podcast here, and I remember it was about almost actually just over yeah, a year and a couple months ago. I talked to the CRA because I was actually talking about the Canada Disability Benefit. I was mind boggled. I don't know if you've heard this, Mike, before, but the CRA had told me that anyone on provincial and territorial benefits should automatically receive that benefit because the CRA, we have your information. Like, say what?
Hmm.
Well, we already know who's on provincial and territorial benefits, sir.
Yeah.
So we already have your T5007 on file. So we know who's on benefits. I go, well, apparently they say that you have to apply for all this stuff. Yeah, you know what? I'll leave it up to the federal government to make that decision, but we have information. I'm like, so you're admitting I didn't say that, sir.
Yeah.
It's just one more example, right, Brent, where
Yeah,
if they were serious about this the way, and I said this in Parliament over and over
yeah.
again, if they were serious about it the way they were about the
Yeah.
Canada Child Benefit or
Hmm.
about the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the order would have been reversed. They would have allocated funding first,
Hmm.
and they already had eligibility defined based on provincial and territorial programs.
Yeah,
That anything else is a bunch of rhetoric,
yeah,
but and that to me is part of, what I'm hearing from folks with disabilities in my community, what it looks like to fix the CDB is to remove the DTC as the
yeah.
barrier,
Yeah.
to increase the amount to be above the poverty line so that's at the very least adequate, to remove the household income criteria as another example.
Hmm.
These are things they could do tomorrow if they were serious about it. And if they're going to get serious, we will need to continue to advocate so that they feel that pressure, that that's what is required to happen.
Because
Well,
I know I had the phone call with them, the line dropped off. They said, "Looks like we got a lot of static interference or something." I think I think the individual just didn't want to go there on that one. It just ended the call. It was like it just dropped right off. I'm like, "Wow, that's a nice call, right?" But you're right, Mike. The federal government could change things just like that, snap of a finger, and it just takes that initiative to realize that maybe they're not impacted by their decisions. I mean, it impacts people's lives who live in legislative poverty across Canada, and it's like they live in a bubble, right? And it doesn't affect their lives until they realize that yeah, their decision making really has a huge impact, not on, I mean, just people with disabilities, but also on the community that they live in, right? If they don't have that money, they can't put that money back into the communities that they live in to help, small businesses, or they can maybe go and buy some clothes, buy some more adaptive equipment that they need, medications, just their well-being, and paying their high market rents. I mean, which are, that's another topic in itself. But I mean, it's crazy where people have to cut back. They have to keep cutting back and cutting back because food inflation is a all-time high. And I guess with that carbon tax credit that we had, I mean, that really made a huge difference across Canada for people with disabilities and in poverty. And it should have been replaced into somewhere else. Like, they got rid of that carbon tax credit. They could have shifted it over somewhere else and helped people in a different area. But instead, they scrapped it. So that's one source of income. That was a loss. And I know I talked to, we had a rally in BC just recently, and our member of the Legislative Assembly here. And I mentioned to our MLA at the time that these tax credits, I mean, it was a loss of income, and I said, just have to raise the rates. Well, we're waiting on the Canada Disability Benefit, and again, see, they're waiting on a federal government to do this. Meanwhile, they take away these tax credits, and so it actually has a huge impact on people's lives. And I still think that if maybe the provincial governments, I mean, rather than waiting, just boost up their rates in the meantime, and when the federal government finally gets around to getting this Canada Disability Benefit going, they could just do it as a top-up.
But the other thing we're not talking about, Brent and Mike, is that the fact that the CDB, the Canada Disability Benefit, is means tested, because
Yes,
let's get to the point that it's $200 right now. It's $200 maximum.
Right.
And there's I was looking at all of the ways they can disqualify you. Like there's a whole laundry list of oh, well, we're gonna disqualify you for this. We're gonna disqualify you for this. We're gonna disqualify for. I mean, it's ridiculous, So I mean, like I'm looking at it and thinking, well, I actually have the DTC, but that's not a guarantee that I'm gonna get it. They're probably gonna find a way that, oh well, Neil, sorry, you don't qualify. You might get $2 of that $200.
That's right.
On one place.
That's right. That's right. That's why, again, we were calling for the disability benefit to be fixed, and removing the means testing was one of what we were calling for. Right now, we should be really careful. It's up to $200. It's not a $200 monthly benefit. It's up to, and that means testing begins at $24,000 a year. And as you say, Neil,
which is super low.
That's right.
Low.
That's right. But again, a credit to the disability community. We were also advocating on ensuring there were no clawbacks from provincial and territorial partners. And that's actually one of the reasons why I put forward one of the amendments I did that requires agreements between provinces and territories and the federal government to be made public. Because we knew in the federal bill we couldn't put in place a responsibility of another order of government, but we could require the federal government to make public their agreements, in hopes that if those agreements don't include provisions to prevent clawbacks, that they might be, embarrassed by that, or might have an increased accountability to ensure that they did prevent clawbacks. And you might remember back at committee, that was a close one. We won that on a vote of 6-5.
Yeah, there was a lot of close votes.
Oh, there was.
Yeah.
It was one of the 5 amendments of the 9 total, but 5 that my team and I were successful with bringing forward from the disability community. But fast forward to today, and I can say we just learned that Ontario, despite leaking memos that were suggesting they may attempt to claw back, we now know that they won't be. And I believe you both would know better, but I think other provinces and territories look to be following suit as well.
Yeah.
So
Alberta clawing back, though. Apparently,
still calling back.
Alberta is right. So Alberta is the one that we know of any.
Terrible.
So, but again, that's a publicly known, in part as a result of that change to the federal legislation. And I can say in provinces like mine, that would add, more embarrassment for the provincial government if they were to attempt to do that. Looks like folks in Alberta will need to put pressure on to ensure we prevent those clawbacks too.
I just think all of the barriers of the CDB that still exist, I just look at it and think, well, that's purposeful attrition. That's purposeful attrition that the government's kind of built in that attrition. Like, we're going to make this so hard for you to even apply for it, to even qualify for it, that you're just going to give up and drop off and say, oh well, who cares? Because it's too difficult. People are just going to give up, and it's going to be an attrition thing, right? And I think that's a big thing that's going on behind the scenes.
I think you're absolutely right, Neil, and we know that based on the lack of funds allocated for the benefit. Again, this is something I shared, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head right now, but if you look at the Canada Child Benefit and the Guaranteed Income Supplement programs that the disability benefit were compared to,
Yes.
they were orders of magnitude more. I think like around, it was 20 some odd billion dollars. I can find one of my speeches from years ago to track the number, but in the order of like 20 some odd billion per year.
Wow.
The disability benefit is 1 billion per year.
Right.
So Neil,
Like
when you look at all the barriers, all of the means testing, all of that is partly how it got reduced to that scale that should not be compared to the Canada Child Benefit or the Guaranteed Income Supplement, because it is orders of magnitude smaller in total disbursements to a population that is living in poverty every single day. And what I said to the Prime Minister in question period one day is he nor I, neither one of us know what it's like to live under the crushing weight of legislated poverty every single day. That's why we should be listening to the disability community. And unfortunately, what they came out with, while it may help some, it's just completely inadequate.
The majority of PWD are not going to benefit from it. I mean, when I say that, I mean, because it's so many barriers of means tested. I mean, the household income. I mean, if you got two PWD, just for instance, on provincial benefits, I mean, if that household income gets too high, you're not going to qualify. I mean, that's one thing that I look at too. I've talked to people in my community too, and we have a apartment building that's a couple doors down from here, and the discussions all the time is Canada Disability Benefit. Do you know any updates, Brent? Do you know any updates? I'm following it very closely. And the one fear and the question that I hear all the time is, how is that going to impact my household income? I said, that is a good question. I said, okay, so you got two PWD, both of you? And they're like, yeah. Okay, so in BC, it's I think it's like almost $18,000 per individual per year. So it's $36,000. I said, so if that household income exceeds that amount right away, you're not going to get that Canada Disability Benefit. I said, I could be wrong, but I said it is a very unknown charter of waters here that we're kind of exploring, because the federal government has said they don't want to divulge information out where it affects people's lives. So that's the voice that I'm carrying forward, I guess. And what do you take on that, Mike? I mean, I guess the fear that people were worrying about on that.
Well, I guess constructively, I'm thinking about, the advocacy that can still be done and needs to be done by the disability community and those who seek to lift up their voices. And that means pushing for applications to open. That's the clarity, right?
Yeah.
With the application process would provide a further level of clarity for how it will be assessed and if it will start in July. And so pressing for applications to open, pressing to not let them forget the promise they made, because that's part of, I think, the strategy is it gets dated, there's no minister responsible, and that reduces their sense of accountability. But continuing to press to fix and fully fund the Canada Disability Benefit, that needs to be a priority. We are hearing about other priorities seeing increases to their budgets. Why is it that the disability community is not being prioritized? If the minister, as of last week, wasn't able to recite the actual name of the benefit, we obviously have a need for more advocacy and more public pressure, not just to open applications, but to fix and fully fund the benefit. I'd say the third to also consider that I've been hearing from groups like Inclusion Canada and others is to now also watch for the details of other pieces of legislation that may impact the disability community. And so one example is this new legislation to reduce the personal income tax rate.
The bill C2, is it?
I think it's C4.
C4?
But that would actually reduce the disability tax credit
Yes.
in the current form. So we need to improve Bill C4. I'm understanding folks with disabilities who have the DTC will lose $98 in that tax credit, affecting 900,000 people. So now you're
too. That's for the first year, and for the second year, it's probably double that again.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's also be clear: reductions in broad-based income tax are fairly expensive. And this one, for example, the CCPA has made clear 3/4 of the financial benefit will be seen by the wealthiest 40% across the country. Will enjoy 3/4 of the tax savings from a broad-based income tax reduction of that kind. It's again why this Canada Disability Benefit was so important, is because it was targeted towards those who need it the most. That's where we should be delivering either tax savings or net new benefits. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is separate from pushing for applications to open and fixing and fully funding the Canada Disability Benefit. I'm going to try to keep following the lead from the disability community to make sure that other pieces of legislation don't make things worse along the way. But sometimes it's about reducing harms. And this is another example in C4 where we need to make sure that a separate measure, which we can debate on its own. This is also the bill that removes the carbon rebates that you were mentioning earlier, Brent. So this bill will wipe out carbon rebates in legislation forever. And as of right now, it will reduce the disability tax credit.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Wow. What to do there?
Yeah.
We've come to the end of the show, Brent. You've got 1 minute to wrap up.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's so many things that need to be fixed with the Canada Disability Benefit. I can't believe it, like 5 years, and the government still hasn't got that benefit out to people in provincial and territorial benefits and federal CPPD federal benefits. There's definitely a lot of action that needs to be taken. Fast track this benefit, federal government. People's lives don't get put on hold. Disabilities don't get put on hold, right? It affects people's well-being. They know what benefits them, right? And that's the benefit that you promised. So please get that out ASAP and just streamline it. So anyone on provincial and territorial benefits, get it automatically. None of this red tape. Cut all the red tape. Give me the scissors. I'll cut it myself. But thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on and joining us today. And I look forward to having.
Let's do this again for number 13.
Yes. Sure.
I would like that. Again, I think it's just so important for everything we finished talking about over the last hour that this advocacy needs to continue. I'm going to continue to be a voice that's speaking out. I will continue to be, serving in the Green Shadow Cabinet with a focus on disability rights and inclusion. And I continue to be just deeply disappointed that there are so many folks in my community with disabilities living in poverty. And so if I could help to continue to amplify with the platform that I have, I'd like to do that. And I'll be better at it if we continue conversations like this one. And so thanks again for what you both do to lift up the voices of the disability community. We need voices like yours, both yourself, Neil, and Brent. And so, I just really appreciate you both. It's great seeing you again. And if you'll have me back again, still,
always.
I'll look forward to it.
All right.
It'd be a great pleasure, Mike, for having you back on. And we'll make it number 13, and carry on from that point on.
Baker's doesn't.
Advocacy never stops. I have to say the the tireless advocacy, and they never take a break. And some people say, well, Brent, are you going to take a break in the summer? I will be taking a break just for a little bit, but advocacy continues on. Do some brainstorming of different ways of approaching on things, and just spend a little bit of summer sunshine, as we call it. It was 29 degrees this morning, Mike, in here. That was pretty warm. But thank you again, Mike, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed today's show.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
Mike, we'll have you on again soon.